How U.S. gun culture stacks up with the world ubiquitous gun violence in the United States has left few places unscathed over the decades. Still, many Americans hold their right to bear arms, enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, as sacrosanct. But critics of the Second Amendment say that right threatens another, the right to life.
America's relationship to gun ownership is unique, and its gun culture is a global outlier. As the tally of gun-related deaths continue to grow daily, here's a look at how gun culture in the U.S. compares to the rest of the world. There are 120 guns for every 100 Americans, according to the Switzerland-based Small Arms Survey. No other nation has more civilian guns than people.
About 44% of U.S. adults live in a household with a gun, and about one-third own one personally, according to an October 2020 Gallup survey. In the U.S., firearm manufacturing is on the rise, with more Americans buying guns. Almost a third of U.S. adults believe there would be less crime if more people owned guns, according to an April 2021 Pew survey. However, multiple studies show that where people have easy access to firearms, gun-related deaths tend to be more frequent, including by suicide, homicide, and unintentional injuries.
It is then unsurprising that the U.S. has more deaths from gun violence than any other developed country per capita. The rate in the U.S. is 8 times greater than in Canada, which has the 7th highest rate of gun ownership in the world, 22 times higher than in the European Union and 23 times greater than in Australia, according to Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation data from 2019. Globally, countries in Latin America and the Caribbean suffer from the highest rates of firearm homicides, with El Salvador, Venezuela, Guatemala, Colombia, and Honduras topping the charts. Drug cartel activities and the presence of firearms from old conflicts are both contributing factors, according to the 2018 Global Mortality from Firearms, 1990 to 2016, study. But gun-related violence in Latin America and the Caribbean is also exacerbated by weapons that come from the U.S. About 200,000 firearms from America cross Mexico's border every year, according to a February 2021 U.S. Government Accountability Office report, citing the Mexican government. In 2019, about 68% of firearms seized by law enforcement in Mexico and sent to the ATF for identification were traced back to the U.S. And around half of guns the ATF checked after they've been seized in Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, and Panama were manufactured in or officially imported to the U.S. While personal safety tops the list of reasons why American gun owners say they own a firearm, 63% of U.S. gun-related deaths are self-inflicted. Over 23,000 Americans died from self-inflicted gunshot wounds in 2019. That number accounts for 44% of the gun suicides globally and dwarfs suicide totals in any other country in the world. At 6 firearm suicides per 100,000 people, the U.S. rate of suicide is, on average, 7 times higher than in other developed nations. Globally, the U.S. rate is only lower than in Greenland, an autonomous Danish territory with relatively high gun ownership. Multiple studies have reported an association between gun ownership and gun-related suicides. One of those studies, conducted by researchers at Stanford University, found that men who owned handguns were almost 8 times as likely to die of self-inflicted gunshot wounds as men who didn't own a gun. Women who owned handguns were 35 times as likely to die by firearm suicide, compared to those who didn't, according to the 2020 study, which surveyed 26 million California residents over a more than 11-year period. Regular mass shootings are a uniquely American phenomenon. The U.S. is the only developed country where mass shootings have happened every single year for the past 20 years, according to Jason R. Silva, an assistant professor of sociology and criminal justice at William Patterson University. To compare across countries, Silva uses a conservative definition of a mass shooting, an event that leaves 4 or more people dead, excluding the shooter, and that excludes profit-driven criminal activity, familicide, and state-sponsored violence. Using this approach, 68 people were killed and 91 injured in 8 public shootings in the U.S. over the course of 2019 alone. A broader definition of mass shootings reveals an even higher figure. They counted as many as 417 mass shootings in 2019. And this year, 641 incidents have been recorded. State gun policies also appear to play a role. A 2019 study published in the British Medical Journal found that U.S. states with more permissive gun laws and greater gun ownership had higher rates of mass shootings. The bills are now stuck in the Senate where, despite some Democrats' efforts to build bipartisan support, there has been no indication they have the votes to overcome the 60-vote filibuster. Meanwhile, mass shootings continue to drive demand for more guns, experts say, with gun control activists arguing the time for reform is long overdue. Researchers from Washington University at St. Louis Whitney R. Harris World Law Institute presented this argument to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in 2018, saying that the U.S. government's failure to prevent and reduce gun-related violence through reasonable and effective domestic measures has limited the ability of Americans to enjoy many fundamental freedoms and guarantees protected by an international human rights law, including the right to life and bodily integrity. UN bodies have also underlined these concerns, pointing to America's Stand Your Ground laws, which allow gun owners in at least 25 states to use deadly force in any situation where they believe that they face an imminent threat of harm, without first making any effort to de-escalate the situation or retreat. The 2019 United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights report said that the law can encourage people to respond to situations with lethal force, rather than use it as a last resort. In a 2020 essay published by the Center for American Progress, a liberal Washington think tank, gun control advocate Rukmani Bhatia said that the U.S. gun lobby has seized a rights-based narrative to justify, dangerously, the right to bear, carry, and use firearms. Stand Your Ground legislation, she said, warps people's understanding about their rights to security and, in the worst cases, empowers them to take away another person's right to life. Meanwhile, countries that have introduced laws to reduce gun-related deaths have achieved significant changes. A decade of gun violence, culminating with the Port Arthur massacre in 1996, prompted the Australian government to take action.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.